Welcome back to Hopeful by Nature. This is your host, Scott Shepard, and my guest today is Marco Wendt, who spent nearly 30 years at the San Diego Zoo Wildlife Alliance working with some of the most difficult animals to know. Difficult not because they're dangerous, though some are, but because they don't meet you halfway. You have to earn it. You have to earn that relationship. Over time, Marco realized the same was true of people. Getting someone to care about a species they've never encountered to feel genuinely protective of something they may never see requires the same patience, the same attention and willingness to enter something else's world on its own terms. That's what this conversation is all about. I'm excited to have Marco here today. Welcome to Hopeful by Nature.
Thank you so much, friend. Really excited to be here and talk about all manners of wildlife.
I'm excited to learn all about the different animals that you have had the opportunity to build relationships with through your work. But what do you feel like is the earliest memory that you have of an animal that felt more than an animal to you, felt like you were building a relationship?
Yeah, with that specific question, I started working for a zoological organization here in San Diego when I was 16. I joined a job fair when I was a junior in high school. And at the time, I was thinking of either joining theater when I graduated or working with wildlife. And I happened to work for a summer job here at a place at the time called the Wild Animal Park, which is now called the Safari Park. I'm going to use the word bond, but I don't want to make it seem like there's a sort of like a deeper human connection with the wildlife that I've been working with. These are still wild animals, but I was developed to build a rapport or a trust-based relationship with an animal called the Cinereous Vulture. It's also called the European black vulture, largest vulture species in Europe and Asia. His name was Clarence. Clarence was maybe a little aggressive to a good amount of human beings, but for whatever the reason, he and I built up a good rapport, and that really broadened my horizon at the emoting ability of all wildlife, that people tend to associate certain human emotions only to maybe an elephant, as an example, when we're talking about non-humans. But there's a plethora of wildlife that showcase and exhibit the same kind of emotions outside of the mammal kind of diaspora.
Yeah, you said a couple different things there. Like one, you said that you were thinking about going into theater and then found yourself in wildlife conservation. And I can't tell you the number of people that I've met that work in the scientific communication or interpretation field that have dabbled in theater, because there's so many transferable skills from being able to present, being able to project, being able to engage an audience.
Yeah.
And then also tap into like empathy with the people that are listening to what you have to say. You're portraying an emotional awareness through not just your individual relationship with that particular animal, albeit wild, but you're portraying that emotional awareness with your audience as well and inviting them into relationship with you, whether you're like on stage as a performer, giving a Shakespearean monologue, or whether you're sharing information about a particular animal. So that's so cool that you found yourself in this conservation space and you're still utilizing that skill set. That was something that you were passionate about growing up. Was there
thank you.
another person who like guided you or brought you into that conversation or showed you that you could use those skill sets in this other field?
Yeah, honestly, two people come to mind. One is from a high school drama teacher named Mrs. B. I love her so much, and I've talked to her about this now in the position that I'm in. She taught me how to be able to be confident and express certain emotions in a theater kind of aspect, right? And she helped mold my skill sets. And from there, joining what was then called a bird show at the zoo that I was working at. And honestly, when I did that, I met up with the manager at the time named Kent Mahappe, and he taught me how to read behavior with wildlife, but also be an engaging personality in a sort of stage atmosphere. And to what you were describing as well, all of that is true. I would also expand to it that Kent taught me not only the performance aspect of how to engage a crowd, but really it's almost like reading behavior. So whether it's reading behavior of the wildlife that I am presenting to the general public, but also sort of reading the behavior of the humans that I'm sort of speaking with and try to shift it towards, that particular subspecies, let's say.
Yeah, I love how you're describing learning how to read animal behavior with wild animals and then placing that onto your relationship with humans. I find so many people that work in this conservation space develop these skills through their work that end up being transferable to their relationships or being transferable to their workplaces. or being transferable to parenting strategies, for example.
You'd mentioned about theater and the skill sets that help with variety. And I say that all the time. Even just the concept of what improv can do in itself, putting you in a comfortable situation, trying to think, right on the mark and the money and adapting and sort of challenging your brain. So to your point, I feel theater in particular will help on a whole slew of different kind of professions out there in the world as well. Reading animal behavior. I mean, the people that are close to me, like I'm constantly reading behavior, and that's just what I do, and I love it, and it's helped me guide me towards the goals in my life, I should say.
So you mentioned working in the bird show kind of early in your career. I can tell you, like, I attended a lot of those bird shows as a kid.
Oh, you did?
Oh, absolutely. Like,
Oh,
I certainly recall there was like a gray parrot that there was a series of jokes with that were like these.
yeah, the rapid fire Bruce Nadell and Lolita is
Yes,
what you're
Bruce.
talking about.
Yes, of course. I totally
Yeah.
remember those shows growing
Yeah.
up. That's so cool.
Yeah. They were like, they're almost like zoo rock stars. And for your listeners who are not aware, it was a bird show with different kinds of species. And it was a little lighthearted kind of presentation. And there was sort of like a back and forth, like an Abbott and Costello kind of style, with an African gray parrot, and a green, or a yellow fronted Amazon, I believe, or yellow headed Amazon named Lolita. So yeah, there's a few. Mm-hmm.
Gosh, that's so funny. You're bringing me back so many memories.
Yeah, right.
That's hilarious. So obviously, like, as an audience member, I had an idea of what that job might entail or what it might be like to have that job. I'm sure you came up with your own ideas or perspectives of what that might be, but you've been in this job for a while now. You've done a series of different jobs within this organization. Like, what did you think it was before you were there, and what have you learned since?
Yeah, initially going into it, I thought it was solely entertainment, admittedly. I didn't know anything about shows in a zoological setting at the time. And this is when I'm 16, 17 years old. So we're talking about like maybe late 90s at this point when I joined in. And when I started joining the team, I realized there's a lot of aspects that I didn't realize. I mean, there is an aspect to entertainment to try to engage the crowd, which is why that particular show was a little more on the lighthearted end, a little campy, but we still showed natural behavior, so that was, I think, the initial change for me, the way of sort of engaging the crowd with a little levity, but also putting in those concepts of conservation as best we can. And we do move the sphere of emotions, I think, during our show. There were some maybe a little heavier concepts we would put out, but overall it was on a lighthearted note. We'll find those ways of the hills and valleys, right, of engaging the crowd, if we're sort of monotonous in our way of communicating, it'd be kind of dull. So that was something I really took from that show, was a way of engaging the crowd, but also getting in the messaging that I felt was so important.
Yeah, it's clear that you're not just observing behavior, but you're listening. You're listening to the animals, you're listening to the audience, and you're probably changing your tools in your toolbox based off of what the needs are of both that animal and that community. I know before we joined the call, like in our last conversation, you talked a little bit about how you designed some bilingual programming and how you started engaging your audiences using English and Spanish. What really inspired you to start heading down that path? Was it a moment when you were listening or observing behavior and you realized, oh my gosh, I can use this other skill set as well? Like, what was that moment for you?
Yeah, it was honestly, it's a longer story, and I'll try to keep it as condensed as I can, but it was lack of representation as a child. So long story short, my family's from Mexico. I'm first generation. I'm the first person in my family to be born in the United States. So I grew up in San Diego at the time, and coincidentally, even around these times as well. But in that particular moment in my life, I was one of the only Mexican kids in the classrooms. I would get ridiculed and made fun of a lot for being a Mexican child. I would get in trouble for speaking in Spanish. I'd get pulled a lot out of my classes to learn English, but it wasn't in a supportive way. It was almost like, how dare you not know English? So I was almost taught inadvertently to be embarrassed, shy, of who I was. So I was taught to hide it for quite some time. Growing up here in San Diego, I visited the safari park or the zoo generally in a school atmosphere. My family was lower income, so we try to access it when we can. But seeing the lack of representation of people of color, and I also represent the queer community as well. So not seeing that representation growing up initially and then joining these organizations, it was sort of like my own personal mantra. And I make a joke about, I learned English watching cartoons like Captain Planet in the 80s, and also listening to a woman named Joan Embry, who was the original ambassador for San Diego Zoo at the time. And it was those aspects of messaging, of being a presenter to a zoological setting, but also, it sounds silly, but Captain Planet taught me the importance of should be proud of who I am and help support others. So that's really how it started for me.
I don't think that's silly at all. I think you're speaking to the values of so many 90s kids out
Yeah.
there. Captain Planet with like a sense of pride. Like, we're the Planeteers and you can be one too. And look at you
Yeah,
now,
that's
Mark.
exactly right. I totally know it. It's funny as a child, those who are familiar with it, there are several kids who represented from around the world. And I was so
Yeah.
excited. One, Mother Earth was a person of color, which was wicked for me, as a kid. And two, there was a Latin kid represented on TV. There was another cartoon called Johnny Quest that I loved as a child because Haji was a brown skinned kid. And it was the first time I saw a brown skinned person on television, but he was sort of like he wasn't the main character, and for Captain
Yeah.
Planet, it felt like everyone had equal representation. As a child, they have different powers: earth, wind, fire, water. The Latin child had the power of heart, which is a way to communicate with wildlife and with human beings. And it was funny because at the time I thought like that's the lamest power out there, but then I've heard a recent study about that actual cartooning the characters, and someone sent it to me that it's a mantra that I've lived my whole life, and that I've sort of become that character, the communicator, the way of uniting wildlife with people. Even now talking to you, these emotions are coming out to me. I'm feeling a little emotional about the concept of it, of being sort of isolated in this environment, but having the will and the strength from the people around me to really push forward in concepts of language, and pushing myself to be the representative for the Latino community, the queer community, and basically everyone else that I felt were the underdogs at that time.
I think that's beautiful, Marka. I mean, I'm sure that there are people that will be listening to this podcast that feel like they can relate and understand kind of where you're coming from. That idea of art and having that be central to not just the messaging that you're providing, but the way that you show up and the way that you represent, underrepresented identities, is an amazing thing. Like, so cool that like now you're getting a chance to be that person for so many other kids like yourself that grew up in this community. You also mentioned access, and I'm curious, like, I've seen a lot of studies that demonstrate that kids who lack access to the outdoors, maybe because of culture, or maybe because of language, or maybe because of knowledge, or a sense of safety, are likely to only visit these places like the zoo or a park or the beach when they're on a field trip, because their families just don't have necessarily a sense of belonging in those spaces. So
Yeah,
why would they choose to go there of their own volition?
right.
What kind of recommendations would you have for folks like land managers or other zoological societies or aquariums to really make sure that people feel like they have a sense of belonging in those spaces,
Yeah.
and that that is a place where they should be coming of their own volition, because it's theirs just as much as it is anyone else's.
Yeah, no, and this is a longer conversation, of course, but it's some concept that I know that I've been partaking myself on an individual aspect is if organizations, wildlife organizations specifically, support the staff that they represent. Oftentimes there is that lack of support within these organizations to really show the diversity of people that are supporting their mission. I mean, we specifically, I can speak to the organization that I'm aligned with at the moment, that we have our versions of diversity, equity, inclusion programs. And I think that's an excellent way for many institutions to implement some way of creating those equitable spaces and really giving that platform for people that maybe even don't know where to begin at this point. So even on our aspect, I'm proud of a program that I was a part of called Plant a Seed, which is a way of giving access for lower income communities now around the city of San Diego in particular to access our our zoos, to come in particular to show them that the diversity of people within different roles, whether it be a veterinarian or a zookeeper, or buildings and grounds, or maybe we're interested in being a CEO. But the point was to show representation. And again, I spoke to the lack of it as a child myself. So the goal was just they can physically, with their own eyes, see these people, man, woman, everyone in between, however they want to identify, whatever skin tone and culture they represent, and just see that for themselves and have that connectivity. Because it's easy to talk about it, but really you have to put in the action, and the effort, and especially for younger kids, I think connect with that more, that you're making that effort to really welcome them in these spaces.
Quick break from that conversation. We'll be right back with Marco. I'm Scott Shepard, founder of Wildward Institute. Marco just spent the last 20 minutes on what it actually takes to make outdoor space feel like it belongs to a kid who's never set foot in one. The curriculum, the mentorship, the years of deliberate design behind that feeling. That's the work I help with. Maybe you're a parent wondering if your kid's outdoor program really builds that connection. Maybe you're an educator designing it from scratch, or running the organization behind it and need an honest outside read on whether it's actually landing. That's what my field program audit is for. A 90-minute deep dive into your program, what's working and what's not. $500, and it's the fastest way I know to get a real answer. Find out more at wildwardinstitute.net. That's WILDWARD institute.net. Now, back to Marco. There are so many examples of young kids feeling like they can't achieve something because they've never seen someone that looks like them achieve that goal. And it sounds like what you're saying is your organization today is almost engaging in an act of resistance by providing information and education to the general public that, like, hey, anyone can do these jobs. Particularly in a moment when the federal government is devaluing some of those initiatives and values that you just mentioned, like DEIA. My whole career has been around expanding equitable access to the outdoors. And zoos do that in a really interesting way because they're really like bringing the outdoors in and providing access in a way that you might not be able to otherwise. But I've not really thought about how we as educators or communicators or interpreters can use our platform to raise awareness of like pathways to achieve these particular goals. I'm thinking about what you're saying, and I'm appreciating what you're putting out there. What a cool thing that you're in this role today and you're able to really open up doors for other people. Like, you've walked through this door yourself and you're leaving it open behind you. That's an amazing thing.
No, thanks, man. And honestly, it's a simple thing, but it's like the concept of like, I'm thinking about you. And that's like the easiest way I can describe it to you. So it could be a thing like, perhaps I have conservative news that I'm doing an interview for a particular organization. So a little thing like maybe painting my nails as an example. It's sort of an indirect way to let those who maybe express themselves in a non-gender binary way. This is my way of like, hey, I see you and you're part of what I'm talking about as well. Or maybe I'll throw in some Spanish in certain communications I'm doing, even if it's not a Spanish focused interview. Or if I'm talking about a very popular species, I'll mention others that will get equally positively affected by a particular conservation project. But that's really like, I think just the core of what I'm trying to do. My inner sort of goal is just to remind those communities that I represent and those that I've seen side by side next to me that I'm thinking about you too. And it's not just, the status quo.
I think about that a lot of the time as well, like particularly as a person who, I'm a white, cisgender, straight male, and I want to be able to achieve similar opportunities to expand equity for folks of color, for folks in communities that I don't necessarily represent or that I'm not necessarily a part of. In my own life, I made it a really high priority to learn to speak Spanish so that I could use it in a professional setting. I could use it when teaching. I could use it when engaging people in the workplace. But I spent maybe 15 years learning the language and started to try and use it in a professional setting and realized that I still had a lot of learning to do as it related to cultural fluency. I still had a
Yeah.
lot of learning to do as it related to how I can use that language as a way to make other people feel comfortable. Because there were moments where I would use Spanish and it was clear, just observing human behavior, that I was making someone feel uncomfortable, or I was
Mm.
making them feel as if um, they were less than me because I was changing myself to accommodate them.
Yeah.
And that's certainly not my intent. I think there are probably a lot of other people in this field that like desperately want to be able to be an ally to the communities that you're describing. Like, what kind of recommendations would you have for those folks, maybe working in conservation or working in education or working with wildlife, to achieve like quality allyship in a way that doesn't feel tokenized or a way that doesn't feel inauthentic?
Yeah. There's a lot of concepts to that, but the main one that I've personally been sort of experience in the past with certain friends of mine who didn't represent a certain demographic. And this person, I don't want to give any names, but this person was feeling some kind of way because they were feeling perhaps what you were feeling at that moment, that expression that you had said. And this person was trying to emote and say how much they were supportive and giving a voice to it. But the community didn't respond to it in the way that this person was hoping towards and was telling me this and was frustrated with it. And I told this person, sometimes in communities, you just have to listen. And it sounds so easy, but it's sort of like whatever access or privilege you may have to create this space that now you're both in this scenario. But perhaps there's a lot to be said about doing less and just offering that platform, stepping back and just being able to listen. And I'm not saying you're not listening because you were listening. You were reading the behavior and you were reading it right and you knew how to adapt to it. But in this particular situation I was involved in, this is a sort of concept that's been brought up a lot in some of the meetings or organizations I've worked with, especially with members outside of those particular communities that, as much as they want to help, sometimes just taking a step back and just listening initially is really shows a lot of respect, I think.
That goes back to what you were saying before, right at the start of our conversation about like how you learn to observe behavior and how you learn to adjust your presentation style or adjust your engagement style based off of what you're seeing and hearing.
Yeah.
Like it's you can't co-create or exist in space together if you're not willing to allow both voices to exist.
No,
So
exactly.
you have to listen. You have to be able to hear and validate and understand if you really want to be able to work together to break down and dismantle barriers to access
Yeah.
or achieve these conservation goals.
No, definitely. And again, I was trying to give just a very short kind of rendition of these kind of ideas, but that's kind of the core for me, just listening and just maybe even offering these platforms for people. And I think just being supportive, is really the number one thing.
It seems like you're really walking the talk in this space of, creating opportunities for other people to like come into this field of conservation and continue the ethic of heart, like in our world, not just with animals, but in our communities as well. Like, what changes have you seen in the folks that are coming into this field, maybe like as a result of some of that work that you're doing or that you see other people doing? Like,
Yeah, I mean, I would love to say that maybe I helped out in a little bit, but honestly, now it's amazing to me to see that diversity of human beings and the representation that I see in my particular world in zoological settings. It's really incredible. I mean, we have what's called a community groups within our organizations, whether I'm part of the Latinx Hispanic heritage group as an example, but also the queer group also. But it's a way to create these spaces in community, right? To remind everyone that we are connected. And events like it happens right now to be Pride Month. So, there's ways of supporting people. So for my role, because I'm at the moment, I'm a spokesperson for a wildlife organization. And so oftentimes I'll use messaging of wildlife. One particular during this month, I try to remind people how natural the expression of queerness is in the natural world, sort of give that connectivity to people that maybe feel isolated in different parts of the world. And it goes also with like representing the Latino community too. So it's like, for me, I've always been sort of an outspoken individual, and maybe that has helped me out a lot as well. But try to sometimes, in some cases, knocking down a barrier, and just really exposing the diversity of it. And that's what I'm seeing today, which is really, really great. And to your point, I'm doing what I can to help give these avenues, and opportunities to other people. And even in the moment, I'm in, what am I, 43 now, and I'm thinking about, in the future, some retirement. And I think about like, who's going to be taking that space. And at the moment, I'm really trying to support this one individual particular, because she's an amazing human being. And she represents women who are, I think, undervalued sometimes as a spokesperson, just because sometimes it gets very male heavy, but also she represents the community, the Latino community too. So I'm kind of crossing my fingers that maybe I can support this person and she can take on the baton, and keep going.
That sounds really, really admirable, to be able to mentor other people to step in when we move on. That's something that I've really enjoyed doing in my career as well, working with
Mm,
young people. I'm curious, like, obviously, there's this social aspect of our work in conservation, like getting people to feel connected to nature, getting people to feel like they belong in space, getting people to feel like they have a relationship with the natural world and are inspired to protect it.
mm.
What kind of changes have you seen or impacts on conservation have you seen potentially as a result of this wider, diverse set of perspectives and lived experiences that are coming into this field?
So there's been years and years of conservation projects, but I think the change is now for me is the concept of humanity. Whether you live in Tanzania or maybe you live in a village along the Amazon River, maybe you live in New York City, but what's interesting to me is I think people are understanding that connectivity a little more these days. And part of me thinks it had something to do a little bit with the time of the pandemic. I think the pandemic, honestly, the silver linings, even though it was an awful experience for so many, and I lost people myself, but what I'm trying to say is I think it reminded people of a couple things, that we're all human beings and we're all experiencing this awful thing together. And it also reminded people of the importance of nature, of like feeling grass under your feet and sunshine on your face. In my personal opinions, reading behavior generally and a global scale, those are some of the things I've been noticing a little more, that connectivity. And I've been seeing that passion being streamlined further and further these past few years for conservation projects. I mean, I know I can mention projects in my organization, but just the concepts of whether it be large organizations or small, working collectively, sharing information together, and not turning their backs on communities as well. And that's, at least in my world, that's really important as well. Not coming into a community and saying, this is how you should do things. But again, listening to those communities, giving them the platform, the support that they need, and then helping them grow, whatever conservation project or endeavor they're kind of looking forward to, And I believe it so much for him that I think I turned 40, and I tried to veer away from the political talk, but it was a contentious political time. And I'm a spokesperson, whether I'm working as a professional, but also in my personal life and my friends. And I'm always going to say something if I see something. And so I was at the time having difficulty connecting with what I considered the other people that maybe don't represent what I believe in, And so I literally got the word coexist tattooed in Spanish on my forearm for when I find those moments in my personal life of being so frustrated with a particular individual. How could you feel this way when, all these things are being affected in a negative way? I got to remind myself that creating more walls is not going to help things out. And by just hyping up that anger, it's only going to create a further divide. And it's so hard to do. And I'm not saying I'm perfect at it, but it's something I try to remind myself. It's easier in my professional setting, representing and emoting these concepts, but I find it a little more difficult in my personal life at times, to do it. But it's sort of like a mantra in my head, we have to connect with these communities. And I think that's what's happening these days. I think people are connecting, even though it's a little contentious, but I think the World Cup at the moment right now, you'll see, I only bring that up because what I love about it, there's other aspects I don't support, which we don't need to talk about, but what I love about it is of all the global events that human culture creates, this is one for me that actually does tend to unify a good amount of people. When I see, Mexicanos and South Koreans just happy together, even though they're competing against each other, there's a connectivity of humanity, and that's probably the best thing I love about it, I gotta say.
Yeah, so many things of what you just said are making me like think in a bunch of different
Mm,
directions. But I love that you're still speaking to that concept of heart. You know what I mean? Like the question started with like what kind of conservation impacts are you seeing? And then it went right back into like, well, we're seeing these changes in people, we're seeing these changes in community. And like, that feels like that's your personal brand, Marco. Like you are the
Thanks,
heart guy,
man.
which is awesome.
Thanks.
And it fits really well into what we're trying to do with Hopeful by Nature. Like what I'd say is we want to try to inspire hope by talking to people around the world who are connecting kids and communities to nature
Yeah.
in order to care for and protect places where we play. And I heard this speaker from Canada recently say, like, we don't need to protect nature. Nature is going to take care of itself. What we really need to be focusing on is taking care of humanity. Like, if we're not taking care of humanity, then like the planet will just be done with us. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? It existed fine before humanity. It'll exist fine without humanity. Obviously, like we don't want to be detrimental to biodiversity or our existing ecosystems in the process. But the world is changing, and like our cultures and our communities need to change with it. And a part of that is a need to come together through positivity and through shared values. And it sounds like that's what you're really speaking to, and I appreciate that perspective.
No, thank you, Fred. No, and it's something, we're not going to get anywhere if we don't work together, and it's as easy as that. And even I challenge that speaker to, I think I know where they're going with, but I also just want to add as a conservationist, there's so a lot we have to help out because
Yeah.
we have gotten that, we got the carpet dirty. And so we got to clean it up, but yeah, to your point, sometimes letting nature do its thing is also a big part of it as well. Part of that concept of listening and just understanding Mother Nature, knows its way, so to speak.
Yeah. And I'm not like turning my nose up at conservation efforts by any
No,
means.
right. Totally. Yeah.
You definitely need to be engaging in caring for, the places, the animals, the people, the
Right.
communities that
Yeah.
make up the
Yeah.
planet that we love
And,
so much.
and I agree with that speaker. Helping community, helping humanity is going to directly contribute to conservation efforts as well.
Yeah.
You know?
And vice versa.
Mhm.
Helping
Mhm.
conservation efforts is going to directly affect humanity.
Right.
Uh,
Yeah.
So I really like that you're looking for the positivity in the different things that are happening around the world, despite the fact that it may feel divisive at times, or despite the fact that it may feel competitive at times, or despite the fact that it may feel like we're more different than we are alike. In reality, like we do have shared goals, and in like more cases than not, like we care about similar things, like family and the people we love, and by taking
Yeah.
care of the environment, we're taking care of those people too.
Yes. No. And it's something I'm always saying. We all want fresh water. We all want clean air. We all want our families to be happy. There was a recent project I did where I was sent to the south of the United States, and embarrassingly enough, I had my stereotypes and concept in my head of what I was expecting, but I tried really hard to open my mind and drop those stereotypes. And I came back with a human connection that I didn't think was going to happen. But the reminder was like, again, to your point, we're all human beings. Maybe we go through the world from a different way, but we again gotta find that connectivity. And to me, it's a longer conversation, but it's kind of why I tend to avoid maybe big sports events and concerts and things. And it's more of my profession or my personal concept of us as a species. And I just feel, if we maybe apply all this effort and energy and money and structures to just helping people make sure they have food and healthcare and education, man, what a awesome world we would live in if that was the case. Anyway, that was like a side.
No, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, one thing that I think about is like we do see negative things happening around the world, and people working in conservation are often like at the front lines of receiving that information. And it's their job to help share the bad news with the rest of the world. And that can leave people feeling really despondent. It can leave people feeling like there's a lot of doubt. It can even result in like almost like a pre-traumatic stress response
Yeah.
to understanding what could happen out in the world. Like when you feel maybe that sense of like, down, knowing that you're the heart guy, what do you do with that? How do you turn that back into positivity and hope for
Yeah,
other people?
yeah. On a professional environment, I'm always going in with certain messaging in my head. So depending if I'm talking to a group of children or a group of executives, whether it be entertainment field or more conservation oriented. I geared my messaging depending on the group of human beings. I always try to leave with an aspect of hope because it can be very difficult if all I'm saying is the doom and gloom. If the world is burning, polar bears are starving, baby elephants are dying of thirst literally as we speak. Depending on the audience, I will share maybe more, let's use the word graphic concept of what's happening right now in our world, depending if I feel the audience can handle it. I want to be honest about it. So if I'm talking to a group of high schoolers, I want to let them know what that plastic is doing to that condor feeding, or vice versa. But if it's children, I tend to be more on the hopeful aspect, because the brains are developing. But regardless of the human being, the messaging always gives some kind of avenue of opportunity or hope at the end of it. Is if you leave them just rot with anguish and desperation, it's not going to help. We do want to emote and bring these emotions up, but then we want to give a pathway, an opportunity, a way of engaging with those and doing something positive with it.
I'm a parent of some pretty young kids, and I remember studying quite a bit about climate change when I was working for California State Parks and like climate change interpretation
Mm.
in particular when my kids were really little. And the more I learned, the more afraid I felt about the future and afraid that I felt about the world that I was giving to them, or leaving behind for them. But in reality, it filled me with this immense sense of hope of what our society can do for
Mm.
those young people that we care about. And that love can inspire action in such an incredible way. And people like yourself that are in this spokesperson role have the opportunity to really speak to that shared value of love and inspire people to act, inspire people to go and contribute. So really along those lines, um, no matter how many people might be listening to this podcast, what do you feel like is one thing that someone can do as soon as they're done listening to us, to go out and have a positive impact on the places where we play?
Whew. Man, how do I condense that answer? No, I mean, it's finding that connection, I tell kids all the time, I know the world seems to be burning and you're scrolling on TikTok and doom scrolling and whatnot. Just gotta find those moments. It's all those cheesy lines, but they're so true. Just a little drop in the bucket, a little ripple can go a long way. A small action, but the core of it, what I tell kids mainly is just be a good human being. Kindness goes such a long way. And it's these small actions that are going to grow bigger and bigger and bigger. Environmentally, it could be little things like instead of buying that peanut butter that is cutting down just rainforests all over the world with palm oil, you can do it sustainably. You could buy something and communicate to a large organization that I am not going to be helping you destroy that environment. It could be a tiny little thing, like maybe that neighbor across the street that has maybe a certain political flag that maybe you don't necessarily agree with, but perhaps don't just throw a label on that and feel that anger. Take a breath and find that connection, find that coexistence, that humanity connection, and you'll be a better person for it. And again, it sounds odd, but I think it's different for each and every individual, who you are, what age group and community you're a percent. But I guess the core of it, honestly, and maybe I'm thinking outside the box here, but it's just taking a moment and being cognizant, and giving just a little bit of effort. I think that will go a long way.
Yeah, I love that you're speaking to kindness and individual action as things that people can do as soon as they're done with this podcast to help care for and protect the places where we play. And the one thing that I would say to build on that is back to what you were saying about community. Like
Mm.
if we do those things together in community, if we collectively act with kindness, if we collectively make conscious, sustainable decisions, whether with our dollar or with our vote or with our actions on a daily
Mhm.
basis, and we're going to have a collective positive impact on the environment and the communities that we care about. So I really appreciate all of your work. I really want to like just thank you for bringing this perspective of heart and this perspective of kindness and friendship and community and love and across our, our cross differences. Like I couldn't agree with you more that like we do need to coexist together in society right now, and it's such a hard time to achieve that as a collective. But there's
Yeah.
hope, and that's really what all of these conversations about. Is there's hope out there in the world for us to have positive influences on society. So, thank you so much, Marco, for all of your time today and sharing some of your stories. And I feel like we have a lot more to talk about. We might have to have you come back and talk more about
Yeah.
some more of your work.
No, I would love to, Brendo. Thank you for this opportunity. And, there's so much we can talk about and past experience and calls of action, but the more to talk about language and people who are Latin that don't identify with language, but again, like we're all human beings, and I tell people if you're listening to this podcast and maybe you're feeling alone, you're feeling in a dark space in your mind, you don't feel connected, just what I tell people is just look outside if you can, like look up in the air, look at a bird, look at a flower. I mean, look at the earth, or just take a breath and think about like the amazing universe and world that we live in and the organisms and diversity of all this life. And then we get to be a part of it too. And maybe that person will feel a little more connected, in those darker spaces at times.
Awesome. I couldn't agree more, Marco. Thank you again
Thank you,
for
sir.
coming on, chatting with me today, man.
I appreciate
And
it.
if you'd like to learn more about Marco, if you want to listen more or see some photos from some of his work, you can visit our website at wildwardinstitute.net. That's www.wildwardinstitute.net. Thanks again, Marco, and we'll chat with you soon.
Thank you, friends. Stay wild out there. Thanks.
That's Marco Wendt, spokesperson for San Diego Zoo Wildlife Alliance, and proof that the same patience it takes to earn a wild animal's trust is the patience it takes to earn a person's. If you want to see some photos from Marco's 30 years in the field or read more of his story, head to wildwardinstitute.net. That's WILDWARD Institute.net. We've got a newsletter going out alongside the episode with all of it. If something in this episode moved you, be sure to leave us a review, subscribe, and share it with a friend who needs it. This is Hopeful by Nature. I'm your host, Scott Shepard. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.